Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. The Sun, Lord of Mysteries. Reincarnated is eternal blazing sun, in the perilous world of mysteries during the era when the gods walked on earth. Follow him on his journey through this mysteries world. Will he be able to ascend to become the God Almighty? Or, will he perish at the hands of the ancient sun god? Hashtag action, hashtag fanfiction, hashtag fantasy, hashtag horror, hashtag mystery, hashtag Lord of the Mysteries, hashtag dark god protagonist, hashtag reincarnation. Chapter 1 The Beginning. Northern Continent, 4th Epic, Kingdom of Ellias. A magnificent city, perched along a mountain range that stretched across the continent, was illuminated by the bright golden sun. The city was bustling with people and filled with Gothic-styled buildings. Carriages with white horses could be seen on the paved road, as could streetlights with green vines intertwining around the pole. The city served as the capital of the Kingdom of Ellias, one of the 6 kingdoms on the northern continent, which is located on the edge of Solomon Empire. There was also the occasional laughter of children, who were running along the sidewalk, and gossip of noble ladies in the restaurant. The entire city is filled with vibrancy, contrary to the rumors in the northern continent. In the city center, there was a huge Gothic cathedral with spires topped with a golden sun emblem. The Gothic cathedral was built of white marble, and inside the cathedral was the featured intricate structures and drawings depicting various epics from the past, carved on the wall. In the cathedral's entrance, there was a fountain with a marble statue of an angel with speared wings and open hands in the center, facing the sun in the sky, as if to embrace it. Several believers were also seen throwing coins into the fountain while praying, the coins causing ripples to erupt in the clear water and revealing a large number of golden, silver, and bronze coins within the fountains. Inside the cathedral, nobles, commoners, children, and the elderly sat in various seats facing the main aisle, where a priest with blonde hair and white robes stood before a statue of a god. The priest standing in the aisle had a solemn expression on his face and waved his hands at the bands of musicians, as solemn and high music echoed throughout the cathedral halls. The praying session then began, with believers rising from their seats and tapping 4 times around the chest, drawing the symbol of the golden sun, while facing the statue with a reverent expression. The statue depicted a handsome young man, wearing pure white robes and holding a book of deeds in one hand and a golden sphere resembling the sun in the other. At the bottom of the statue's head was a golden halo with rays of light erupting. Akasis, eternal blazing sun, the god of the sun, order, and business, is the one depicted in the statue. Soon, the praying session came to an end, the priest and believers drew the holy emblems, and they finished loudly with rhythmic music that echoed throughout the hall. Praise the sun. With their prayers, the golden halo behind the statue of the god lit up brightly, illuminating the entire hall of church, as sparks of golden light, resembling golden stars, appeared from the light and fell on the believers. Their expression became more pious at the sight of this, as if the god they believed in had personally blessed them. As the golden light dimmed and vanished from the hall, the believers made their way out. A handsome man sat on a wooden bench near the church entrance, wearing a dress that did not appear to match the style of the other people in this city. The man had an angular face and short white hair, and his golden iris glowed and surged like the burning sun in the sky. If believers exiting the church paid closer attention to him, they would notice that the man sitting here was the same as the god depicted in the statue. The believers, on the other hand, could see him and even determine that he is most likely a foreigner based on his dress style, but they didn't seem to notice the resemblance and continued walking without stopping. The man had a lethargic expression and was tapping his shoes on the ground, as if he was waiting for someone. The man was none other than the White Angel, the one who served under ancient sun god. Yes, it was, because the man is no longer the same White Angel. As his thoughts wandered back to his previous life in Earth, the man looked out at the beautiful and vibrant city with slight melancholy. He had a fairly ordinary life. He had just graduated from college, expecting a bright future, only to be confronted with reality. 4. He got a mediocre job, and that's when things started to get worse. The daily monotonous cycle began. The cycle of eating, sleeping, and working remained constant. Even though he received a good salary, it didn't improve his average life. It truly made him wonder a lot about life, because as a child, he dreamed of having a great and fulfilling life, earning a lot of money and saving for the future, and then traveling the world. Now, his younger self's dreams seemed ridiculous, because his entire salary was spent on expenses and bills, leaving little money for him to save. So much for his dream of traveling around the world. However, things were not always bad. He dabbled in fiction to escape his monotonous life, a hobby he abandoned due to the hectic pace of college life. To be honest, this helped him a lot, and it even brought back one of his childhood dreams of becoming extraordinary and living the way that he truly wanted to. However, at the end of the day, he returned to the same work, albeit with a smile on his face. He lived alone because he had moved out of his home at the start of his college. Despite his hectic schedule, he never neglected his family. 4. He would not be where he is today without their love and support. He was honestly looking forward to what the future held for him because he was still young and things could turn around. Perhaps he could still travel with someone he cared about and spend the last days of his life in each other's company. Reality, on the other hand, was far from fair. When he returned home one day, he looked up at the unusual night sky, for the stars shone brightly like never before, and the silver moon in the night sky changed to crimson as he gazed at it, but when he blinked again, the night sky returned to normal. Everything seemed to be just an hallucination to him. This vision kept reminding him of one of his favorite novel, Lord of Mysteries. The crimson moon, in particular, was something he couldn't get out of his mind as he walked on the road sidewalk. All of a sudden, he came to a halt as he became aware of an anomaly around him. He stood alone on the sidewalk, as the people he was walking with and the beeping vehicles on the road vanished. The flickering lights of the skyscrapers had gone dark, and the entire city had fallen silent. He was terrified by what was going on, it was just too creepy. He also felt a tinge of excitement in his heart, which raced along with his overwhelming emotions. Yes, excitement, even if what he has dragged into what may be fatal, because it was his first contact with something extraordinary. Maybe he was really insane at the time. But, before he could act to save himself, the surroundings became hazy and blurry. Everything was slowly fading into oblivion. The darkness engulfed him, knocking him out. Before he went unconscious, he had the impression that whatever was happening to him was not natural, and that he would most likely die as well. Surprisingly, he awoke in an unfamiliar body, and immediately, a flood of memories overflowed into his mind, depicting a fabulous life. The memories merged with him, for he was experiencing and feeling everything. More precisely, it felt as if he were living a second life. From becoming an orphan to being placed under the tutelage of the ancient sun god. Then going on the adventures across the world and battling the mythical creatures. Then, swearing an oath with other kings of angels to always be sworn brothers and achieving glory at the command of the ancient sun god. Finally, falling greed for the power of ancient sun god, which led to him instigating the betrayal. Archias betrayed ancient sun god in the twilight of the sun, as his white sword pierced the ancient sun god's heart from behind. Then, becoming the god of the sun pathway. Archias, the white angel, lived a fabulous life that included memories spanning thousands of years. In comparison to Archias, his existence and life were insignificant. He was gradually losing himself in the process and becoming more and more like the white angel. However, under some unknown power, his remaining self stopped from becoming lost and submerged in the sea of memories. It was as if his remaining self had been anchored by this unknown power. The memories had such an impact on him that he wondered for a moment whether he was Archias or the man from the earth and whether this world was fiction or reality. Finally, the memories completely merged with his mind and the realization kicked him. He knew instinctively that he wasn't the same. He had completely changed, whether in his soul or mind. It was as if he had transformed into someone entirely different from who he had previously been. This, however, did not frighten him. In contrast, he remained calm in the face of such adversity. He realized he was no longer who he used to be, neither the white angel nor a modern-day man from Earth. He was a completely different person. To be more precise, he was a combination of two, inheriting the best qualities of both, divinity and humanity. Honestly, he had no idea what he had become. He also knew his future fate. When the ancient sun god recovered, he will face his certain death. It took him a long time to process everything, and he didn't change his name. Because it was also now a part of him. He had accepted his new life and had let go of the past. Finally, he is Archias, eternal blazing sun. Archias' thoughts were cut short by a sudden voice from his left. Excuse me, sir, do you have a moment to talk about our Lord and Savior, eternal blazing sun? A young man stood in front of the Archias and spoke nervously. Archias was taken aback, but a smile soon appeared on his face. Yes, he gave a light reply. Chapter 2 The Angels. The young man composed himself and began under the golden sun. As he began with a reverent look, his nervousness faded and he became solemn. My Lord claims to be eternal blazing sun. He was born from the Creator's spirit at the beginning of the world. He is also the incarnation of the sun. He is the inextinguishable light that illuminated the world and drives away darkness and evil. He is also the embodiment of order, keeping the world from falling into chaos and depravity. He is also the guardian of business and overseer of contracts. He is also the light of holiness that purifies the world. Your Lord appears to be very powerful. Archias' smile widened as he spoke narcissistically. He is indeed. When the young man saw interest in the foreigner that he was tasked to preach, he became more enthusiastic and continued preaching more sincerely. When cataclysm erupted on the world, our Lord descended with other gods. He was the light that illuminated the world and cleansed it of its impurity. During the cataclysm, he used all of his power to protect humanity. It was because of the Lord's kindness that humans survived, while other races perished one after the other in the cataclysm. The humans who followed him established the kingdom of Ellias along the Antal Mountains. With his blessings, the kingdom of Ellias became one of the most powerful kingdoms on the continent. The young man noticed Akas's expression change when he said cataclysm, which caused him to pause his preaching. Continue, I'd like to know more about your lord. Akas drew his attention away from the ancient sun god and inquired further. The young man continued, despite the fact that he thought this gentleman was strange and most likely a Beander, because just being in his presence made him calm. My lord lives in the golden sun above the entire world, and the rays of his kingdom are spread across heaven and land, giving life and light to all. There are 4 angels in total under him. The angel of light is the Lord's most cherished angel, for he is bestowed upon a portion of our Lord's authority. He is the most merciful of all. He also serves as the Lord's representative and sits beside the Lord's throne. The angel of wisdom is the incarnation of knowledge itself. She is also the recorder of long history and the mystery's fate. She was among the first to follow our Lord. Her knowledge is what got our kingdom and humanity through the post-cataclysm warring era. The angel of temperance is the Lord's most mysterious angel. Little is known about him, other than his various honorific names, angel of tears and angel of duality. Finally, the angel of miracles, he is the embodiment of the miracles itself. He is my Lord's messenger and the bearer of the Lord's revelations. He is the most generous of all the angels, as he is said to grant a wish to anyone who can find him, for only 5 coins. Truly incredible. Akas had a sigh as he spoke. When the young man heard this, he couldn't help but smile, so he began enthusiastically describing his Lord's miracles and deeds. I'm not going to waste your time anymore, sir, for it's already been 20 minutes. If you are interested, you can visit the Cathedral of Dawn right near us. The Mass has just ended, but there will be another at dusk. Trust me when I say that the Mass experience will be unforgettable for the rest of your life. He finally finished. Akas's expression didn't change much, he nodded with the smile as before. I'll definitely pay a visit in the evening. The young man turned and exhaled a sigh of relief at the success of his preaching and the addition of another believer to his Lord's religion. Wait! Akas yelled, causing the youth to turn around. Do you have a problem, sir? The young man was slightly nervous, remembering his strict church school and the fact that if a believer filed a complaint against him, he would face severe punishment. No. Akas laughed, as if he understood the source of his nervousness. Can you tell me your name? Reyes, sir. Subconsciously, the young man said his name. When the youth noticed this, his eyes widened, and he felt a familiar feeling when the gentleman asked his name. Same as, when he faced the high priest, the irresistible feeling to follow every order of the priest. He couldn't even lie and remain silent when the priest asked the question, let alone not answer the high priest's questions. This is a situation that is very similar to this one. The cathedral's high priest is a saint. And this gentleman in front of him. Ellias tried to tuck his trembling hands into his robes. Don't worry, Ellias. Akas spoke in a soft voice. By simply hearing his voice, Elias's fear and restlessness vanished, replaced by serenity. Take this as a gift. Akas pulled a coin with a golden sun symbol from nowhere and tossed it to Elias. For your preaching. The golden coin slid through the air, and the sun symbol on the coin emitted blazing light, causing the coin to gleam before dimming. Elias caught the coin and responded without looking at it. But I can't take it, sir. It goes against. You can have it. Akas interrupted him in deep voice. It will be fine, and it may even save you from a future disaster. Despite his previous words, Elias nodded dazedly and accepted the coin. He did, however, regain enough clarity to ask a question. May I inquire your name, sir? What is my name? Akas was taken aback by Elias' question. It's been a long time since I've been asked that question. He spoke in a rather low voice. However, don't you already know who I am, Elias? Akas said this with a mysterious smile. Elias was also taken aback, and it slowly dawned on him. Despite the fact that he had been speaking to the mysterious man in front of him for quite some time and was still doing so. However, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't recall the man's features. Elias focused on him again to double-check, his eyes widening as he could now see the man in front of him. His eyes were filled with shock, and his entire body trembled with excitement. "You're?" He stuttered in shock. "If fate allows, Elias, we will meet again." Akas spoke up, interrupting him. Snap. When Akas snapped his fingers, everything in Elias' vision was filled with light. Chapter 3 Lucas Reyes, Angel of Light. Akas stood up from the bench, as he looked at Elias, body dissolving into particles of light, which was blown away with the sway of wind. Elias was just teleported back to his church school. Akas walked along the sidewalk, heading to the city's outskirts, until he arrived at the wheat fields. The golden wheat fields stretched all the way to the snowy and steep Ontal mountains, swaying in the wind that blew across the fields. The golden sun's rays gave the wheat a more golden hue, as if it shone with bright golden light. Occasionally, workers with scythes were cutting the overgrown wheat along the large fields. Acasus was now standing on a mud and rocky road, gazing out at the beautiful scenery before him. It piqued his adventurous spirit and satisfied him, which is why he prefers to walk everywhere rather than teleport. Acasus finally turned away from the gold flight and looked at the empty muddy road on the other side of him. You can come out now, Lucas. Acasus' voice echoed down the mostly empty road, with no one in sight until the end of the road. However, just before Acasus, the golden rays of the sun that illuminated the surroundings turned white as pure white feathers made of light appeared, forming two wings, with a figure made of light materializing in between the wings. The wings swayed and folded as the figure appeared, and the light on the figure faded, revealing a man. He was a handsome man with short, neat blonde hair and blue pupils that glowed. He was dressed in a golden layered white cloak and had a gentle demeanor. Lucas Reyes, the angel of light, was the man in question. My lord, Lucas bowed with solemnity and respect in his tone. I hope I'm not bothering you. He inquired because when he arrived, he noticed his lord silently gazing at the scenery before them. Acasus looked at one of his most loyal angels, who was still bowing with utmost loyalty and reverence. Lucas Reyes had lost his entire family in the attack of the demonic wolf's family remnant. He was on the verge of death, but Acasus saved him. 4. Acasus was on a mission to rid the of the remnants of non-human races that were still preying on the weak humans in their madness. That mission was personally assigned to him by the ancient sun god. Acasus also discovered that the boy was born with sun pathway characteristics, and that his parents were most likely from his pathway. So, he took the boy and allowed him to join his legion. Lucas advanced much faster than others, becoming an angel just before the fall of the ancient sun god, and he devoted his entire loyalty to Acasus in return for everything Acasus had done for him. Lucas was also kind to his own people but cruel to his enemies. You're not disturbing anything. As he said this, Acasus shook his head. I was just sightseeing, and it occurred to me that I had never done so, and this kingdom you all built is magnificent, he praised and his eyes bright with emotion, while saying so. Acasus lost a lot on his path of God. When he attained godhood, he gained divinity, and he became more distant and indifferent. However, his humanity is now as vibrant as his divinity, due to change happened within him. It was merely our responsibility, my lord. Lucas was humble, even when he received praise from the person he greatly respected the most. And he was still bowing. But, Lucas was also surprised on the inside, he clearly sensed a change in his lord, the lord was not the same as before. He can tell by the tone of his lord's voice and the words, which are different from the usual indifference and way of speaking. Don't be so modest, Lucas. With a sigh on his face, Acasus interrupted Lucas's thought. He didn't bother, however, to press more and change Lucas's attitude toward him. Even though he didn't like it, but this world had different rules than life on Earth and he was also part of this world now. Also, stop bowing. When Acasus noticed he was still bowing, he motioned for him to stand straight. Lucas stood up from his bowed position and wanted to begin discussing the information that his lord had requested. Not here. Acasus once again interrupted Lucas and spoke with a light tone, let's go somewhere where no one will be able to hear us. However, my lord, Lucas didn't understand, so he spoke up with some hesitation. This kingdom is the Lord's domain, and the order established by his Lord is woven into the very fabric of this kingdom's reality. There is no safer place than here, and no one should be able to bypass his Lord's power. There is nothing perfect in the world, Lucas. Even my order and rules that spread across this kingdom's reality have some loopholes that the capable can exploit. Acasus chuckled, exposing Lucas's inner thoughts. Acasus began walking towards Lucas, while his tone becoming solemn. Lucas, you most likely obtained the information I requested from our spies in the Solomon Empire. You see, there is the problem, the reality of the Solomon Empire is also woven with very distorted rules far more than here, so much so, it won't be wrong to say, that the reality itself obeys Solomon's command. Yet here we are, infiltrating the empire right under Solomon's nose. Thus, while I appreciate your piety and reverence for me, but, don't let it cloud your judgment. I am not omnipotent, as you may believe subconsciously. He said this in a solemn tone, his golden iris glowed as he stood before Lucas. Acasus had not expected to have such an image in the heart of the Lucas, despite the fact that he understood why it was so. However, he was not even the strongest god in the world, let alone omnipotent. So he needs to change Lucas, because if Lucas continues to believe the same way, he will suffer greatly. It was my mistake, my lord. Under the gaze of the Acasus, Lucas's head was down and he was slightly shaking, his expression was that of a daze, because he also just realized. Even though Acasus didn't use any of his authorities, Lucas felt immense pressure on both his body and soul under the gaze of Acasus. Acasus sighed as he saw this and rested his hands on his shoulder. All right, let's go. He didn't give Lucas much time to react, as he snapped his fingers, their figures collapsed and dissolved into golden light particles that dissipated in the wind. Chapter 4 The Situation of Northern Continent 1. Lucas found himself sitting in a chair, with his lord in front of him, and a white round table with 2 cups and a teapot in the center of the table. They were surrounded by a large field of white flowers, and the golden sun could be seen rising through the horizon, lighting up the entire field. There was also wind in the field, which caused the petals on the flowers to sway and separate before joining the wind. Lucas could now see a vast cluster of petals floating with the wind in the sky, as well as no end to the field, nothing but white flowers as far as the eye could see. Lucas became aware that he was in his Lord's divine kingdom. Despite the fact that he had been here before in his astral body, but this was his first time in his physical body. Lucas was experiencing a wide range of emotions right now as a result of being corrected by his Lord and then being brought to the divine kingdom. Lucas paused for a moment to collect himself. He was now determined not to make any mistakes or cause himself any embarrassment. Then he noticed his Lord taking the white teapot from the table. "Do you want coffee or tea?" Audiobook inquired. "Coffee." Lucas took a breather before responding, as he hadn't delved into human needs and habits since becoming a mythical creature. But he didn't dare to say no because it was his Lord who made the offer. This situation in front of him reminded him of a slight change he had noticed in his Lord. Wait. Lucas came to a halt as he came to the most likely conclusion. Has the Lord gained more humanity? He noticed a change in his Lord. He was no longer as cold and indifferent as before, and this was the only explanation he could think of when confronted with his Lord's change. Yes, I have gained more humanity. Audiobook confirmed it, as if he could hear his thoughts. Let's not delve too deeply into this complicated subject. After handing Lucas a cup of coffee, Audiobook said. Start with the information. Lucas took a sip of his coffee before pulling out a file with a picture on the front and placing it in front of Audiobook. The photograph depicted a man in his 30s with blonde hair and dark brown eyes. He was dressed in a noble coat with a unique clock emblem on the top of the coat's pocket. Mobit Zoroast. Under the image, the man's name was boldly written. Before turning to Lucas, Audiobook took a quick glance at the file. Lucas began reciting the information after noticing his attention. Mobit Zoroast is a Viscount of the Solomon Empire and the great-grandson of Duke Perilous Zoroast. He was recently promoted to the Error Pathways Sequence 5 Dream Stealers. He is currently under the care of Duke Perilous Zoroast. Did he have a strange brown book? Audiobook interrogated and inquired. Lucas paused for a moment and recollected, as a book is too common to be found specifically, but they still got a hint. Mobit took part in a recent expedition into ancient ruins led by the Zoroast family. When they emerged from the ruins, Mobit said have been carried a brown book. However, my lord, we are not entirely certain. Lucas concluded. They were able to gather this much information from within the Solomon Empire, only because of Audiobook's personal blessings, otherwise, conducting such a detailed investigation of someone would be impossible. Audiobook rubbed his temples and his mind wandered. That book was none other than Grossel Travels, which contained the divine kingdom of the Dragon of Imagination. This book appeared to have very small significance in the original story, as it was even sometimes used as shield by Klein. Audiobook, on the other hand, knew the book was far from simple. If his assumptions are proven correct, he may have gained a significant advantage over Adam. That is why he is personally utilizing his authority to assist them in conducting this investigation. As a god, one might wonder why he doesn't do it himself rather than sending his subordinates over. As he previously said, even as a god, Audiobook is not all-powerful and omnipotent. Solomon's distorted order encompasses the entire Solomon Empire. It's difficult for a god to extend their influence there, only by using all of their power can they get around the order. Actually, one would expect Solomon to immediately stop them after this. However, he did not do so when this exact situation occurred, with Leodoro attempting to extend his power into Solomon's kingdom. Solomon, on the other hand, takes it a step further and wages war arrogantly. This situation occurred shortly after the establishment of the Solomon Empire, resulting in a god's war between Leodoro and Solomon, which was stopped by Amonines and him due to the amount of collateral damage their fight caused. So, that's why Audiobook uses this way, despite his dislike for the hassle. Lucas, you have been tasked with obtaining that book from him. Finally, Lucas assigned a task in a casual tone, as if it were a simple task. My lord, Lucas said, his voice full of shock and sorrow, as if Audiobook had assigned him a death mission. Well, it is a death mission because they may be able to obtain information, but doing this will immediately draw the attention of Duke Perilous Zoroast, who is Sequence 1. Due to this, Mobit is under the personal care of the Duke, and Lucas didn't think he could evade the Duke. I'm not sending you on a suicide mission. When Audiobook saw his expression, he smiled amusedly. A change of times is upon us, Lucas. You can finish this task in the midst of the chaos that will soon ensue. His expression turned solemn, as he said it in a roundabout way. A change of the times. Lucas's face became solemn. The last time he heard his lord say this, it was just before the fall of the ancient sun god. Will the Solomon Empire fall? Lucas made an outlandish guess. He believed this was more likely because he was aware of another mission assigned to the Angel of Miracles that was far more difficult than this. What about the war in the border? Akas's questioned, shifting to a different topic rather than delving deeper into the change of times. Are the casualties increasing? With a light tone, he inquired. Yes, my lord. Lucas took a pause before continuing. Our protracted war with the Church of the Lord of Storms and the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom had reached a stalemate until before. However, the saints of the Church of God of Knowledge and Wisdom have recently created a spell containing the power of night and darkness that can be cast on a large scale, restraining our troops at the border. Their divination was also successful, and they managed to circumvent the anti-divination artifact we had. The entire front line had been breached. As a result, there were a large number of casualties. Another side of war that was going on with the Church of the Lord of Storms also suffered a setback as a result of this. As the situation deteriorated, I was forced to fight in the war in order to hold the front lines and save the situation. Lucas spoke with solemnity and desperation. Another major piece of news that Lucas wanted to share was this: the war had devolved into a disaster for them. Only his intervention saved what was left, but thankfully it also halted their advance into Ellias' kingdom. So, they had failed miserably in the war, and he was unsure how his lord would react. Even so, he is willing to accept responsibility because he was the commander of the entire legion stationed there. Amanines and Harabergen, Akasas rubbed his temples, regretting his previous negligence to the war. But a lot of things happened to him that took up most of his time. This was giving him a headache. If Harabergen could gain Amanines as an ally, the situation would shift in Harabergen's favor. Chapter 5: The Situation of Northern Continent 2. Akasas will still be able to find the god of combat, but the giant's brain was filled with nothing but muscle, and its entire life was played out in the hands of Amanines. He was so certain of Amanines' involvement because, while the use of night in war may appear simple to others, it had a completely different meaning to Akasas. For the long-running conflict between him, Leodoro, and Harabergen is the result of them being in adjacent pathways and primarily over anchors. Thus, the significance of the war is clear, and the appearance of power of night on such a grand scale is not the result of some saint's simulated power. Without Amanines' consent, something like this will not happen on a large scale. Soon, this situation will evolve into a domino effect, with Angles soon joining the fray and even forcing him to personally join the battlefield, which Akasas doesn't want to see. It's not that Akasas doesn't want to fight with his sworn brothers, but with the Solomon and true creator on the horizon, now was not the time. Akasas drank a sip of coffee to soothe his tumultuous emotions. It's my negligence, Lucas. Akasas spoke in a solemn tone. It's not your fault. You couldn't have predicted the situation. He interrupted Lucas, who was about to speak up and take responsibility for his actions. In relation to this war, Akasas came to a halt, his expression thoughtful. Lucas was nervous as he waited in silence for his lord's plan, and he was surprised that his lord didn't blame himself for the situation on the front lines, but this doesn't make him happy, rather felt more guilty. Don't go aggressive, only be defensive in the war. Akasas finally spoke up, his voice deep. Unless another angel intervenes, leave the situation alone. Lucas accepted his lord's commands and didn't inquire too deeply, knowing that there had to be a deeper reason for his lord to say so. Did my messenger come back, Lucas? Akasas inquired suddenly. No, my lord. He has yet to return, and we have been unable to contact him. Lucas immediately spoke up, slightly nervously, because the messenger of the Lord is also his friend, Angel of Miracles. You don't need to be concerned, he's fine. Akasas laughed as he spoke. His life is too powerful for him to die. Yes, the full pathway is too special, and with the blessing he had given his messenger, so he will have no trouble completing the mission he had assigned to him. Akasas had previously assigned 2 missions to the Angels of Light and Miracles. Both are crucial to his future plans. The Angel of Miracles is tasked with contacting Solomon's subordinates, Turnoist and Alitsa Tutor, and obtaining information on Solomon's status. He was also fairly certain of the mission's success because he knew the future and situation within Solomon Empire. While the empire may appear to be powerful, the corruption and conflicts within the empire were far more than their side. Trunsoest and Alista are 2 angels he had seen before, and he saw genuine concern for the empire in Turnoest's eyes and a thirst for power in Alitsa. All they needed was a gentle nudge in the right direction and make them think it is their own decisions. Akasas was confident that he could achieve his goal and bring the Solomon Empire down. To be honest, Akasas loathed Solomon. It was primarily because Solomon accommodated the true creator in his kingdom that he and the other gods were forced into this precarious situation. Knowing the future and the situation, Akasas can make a reasonable guess that Solomon is now looking for the uniqueness of Justiciar and sequence 1 characteristics of the Hand of Order. Akasas can't let something like that happen. So, despite the fact that this was a high-risk mission for an angel, it had to be completed if he wanted to bring all the gods together and make them realize the threat of Solomon and the true creator combined. This was also how he intended to deal with the ongoing war between the kingdoms. All right, let him come and meet me when he gets back. Akasas told Lucas, and asked on. Are there any other special news in the kingdom? Lucas's uneasy heart settled when he realized the angel of miracles was fine, and he then answered his lord's query. As a result of the sudden outbreak of a new disease and disasters on the outskirts of the continent, there is an increase in the number of refugees entering our kingdom. This disease is also spreading quickly and is extremely lethal. Tens of thousands have already died as a result of it. Hundreds of thousands of refugees are pouring into our and other kingdoms as we speak, my lord, and the situation on the continent's rim is deteriorating. The kingdom of Hail under Earth Mother has already sent an angel to find a cure to this problem, and an angel under Lord of Storms has also gone to stop the disaster. And we have confirmed that this entire situation is connected to the infamous Cheek, the king of angels of the demoness pathway. Lucas purposefully emphasized the word king, causing Audiobook to smile. However, Audiobook did not feel much in his heart hearing about this disaster and deaths. This was not due to the divinity that was making him indifferent, this really did not cause any ripple in his heart. Because he was instinctively indifferent to things that were unrelated to him because of the vast experience and knowledge he had accumulated in these 2 lives. Has Cheek completed her preparations for the godhood ritual? Audiobook was thoughtful, since the ritual to become to God for the demoness pathway is not easy. It was fraught with peril and necessitated the right set of circumstances in order to be carried out. He couldn't wait to see how Cheek would pull it off. Accept the refugees, and it should be no problem to accommodate them. As for Cheek, just keep an eye on the situation. Audiobook gave orders and didn't bother with Cheek because he already has a lot on his plate. Gods, contrary to popular belief, do not label themselves as good or evil, nor do they care. At the end of the day, it all comes down to personal interests. Lucas nodded and resumed with more important news. There are also a large number of hermit pathway beyonders requesting for protection and to join the church. I planned to wait until I heard from you, but the angel of wisdom came forward and personally accepted them. They were defectors from Moses' ascetic order. They showed signs of losing control, and their spirits were unstable. This was observed in almost all of them, prompting us to look into it further. After that, we concluded that they had been corrupted by an unknown source. This corruption had caused them to nearly lose control, but the situation could still be salvaged. However, this situation prompted us to discover that there is a major problem within Moses' ascetic order, and based on the information we gathered from them, there has been a major failure on a very important experiment. But, they couldn't recall anything else related to this experiment. When the angel of wisdom attempted to pry further into the situation, she was stopped by a higher power. Despite the failure, the angel of wisdom discovered that the one who interfered with her was the artisan, the king of angels of the savant pathway. Lucas finished by taking a breather. Audiobook's expression becomes solemn, as he heard this. Despite their adjacent paths, the relationship between the artisan and Moses' ascetic order has always been subtle. Audiobook made an unfounded assumption as to what the problem with Moses' ascetic order might be. If his guesses are proven correct, this is a serious problem and would explain a lot related to future events. Go ahead. Audiobook stated, while not providing any instructions on this. At the command of Audiobook, Lucas was jolted from his relaxed state and continued to provide detailed information about the kingdom's situation. Audiobook sat with his hand on his chin, patiently listening to Lucas's report and providing some instructions and orders in between. This continued as the light of dawn from the rising sun illuminated their figures. Chapter 6 The Last Supper. The next day. The gentle wind blew across the vast flights of white flowers and the rays of twilight shaded the sky in a mix of red and orange glow, making the entire sky more mesmerizing. A white castle was present in the seemingly infinite space, as its outline was faintly visible from a distance. The white castle was perched on top of a mountain. The castle appeared old but not dilapidated, and it had a large number of turrets and towers extending from it. The castle featured stained glass windows depicting a knight in white armor holding a white sword and a golden sun above his figure. There was a large lake in front of the castle that had no ripples or waves, giving it a nearly mirror-like surface. The reddish-orange hue in the sky and the white castle reflected in the lake, and there were also some boats seen tied to the dock. This place was beyond breathtaking, and one could get a sense of its grandeur just by looking around. A man casually sat in a chair on one of the castle's balconies, holding a white porcelain cup filled with coffee in one hand and a book in the other, reading it while taking a sip of coffee. The man's expression was calm and peaceful, his handsome angular face illuminated by the sun's twilight. The man was none other than Audiobook, who was drinking coffee and reading one of the popular novels at the time, which a believer sacrificed to him. Yes, there is still some entertainment in the world. Since the beginning of the Third Epoch, novels, theater, museums, and art exhibitions have been present across the eastern continent. But, nobody could figure out how these forms of entertainment came to be, for there was no clear precedent in history, and they appeared out of nowhere. Audiobook knew who was behind it all. It was Ouroboros. Ouroboros was an art nerd to the core. Despite the fact that the ideas for this originated from ancient sun god, Ouroboros was the one who actively pushed everything behind the scenes. Looking back, Audiobook was a little surprised at how Ouroboros single-handedly staged the Renaissance back then. His friendship with Orobus was actually quite good because he, too, enjoyed painting and they had gone on adventures specifically for this purpose. However, everything between them broke, at the day of his betrayal. And, the majority of his drawings are in his White Castle's walls. Acasus will occasionally look at these paintings to reminisce about the past. Wait. Acasus's rambling thoughts came to a halt as he remembered something. That painting. He received a sacrifice near the beginning of the fourth epoch, shortly after becoming a god. It was a painting painted by Orobus himself. The painting's title was, Last Supper, which is quite ironic now that he know the past mythology and he didn't expect Orobus to have the courage and audacity to actually draw something like that. Image here. The painting depicted him, Leodoro, and Heribergan standing before the corpse of the ancient sun god, which was laid in the stone slab. Acasus tore open the chest of the ancient sun god and took the beating heart of the creator into his hand, while Leodoro tore apart the creator's hand and Heribergan held the sword directly above the creator's head, as if about to sever it, while the background of the painting was completed dark. When Acasus saw the painting at the time, he was furious, for no one will be calm and collected if their actions and stories are depicted in this manner. This was exacerbated by the fact that he was still conflicted about his choices and hadn't fully accepted them at that time. This caused quite a stir at the time, because not only did he receive the painting, but so did Leodoro and Heribergan. To top it all off, Aemon was the one who orchestrated everything, stealing this painting from Orobus and sacrificing to them in the hopes of causing chaos. Aemon came severely close to achieving this goal, as war nearly broke out between the Solomon Empire and 3 other kingdoms. However, it was brought to a halt by the intervention of other gods, and Aemon suffered the most as a result of his actions, while the painting was decided to be destroyed. This was also when Aemon was dubbed, the blasphemer, for daring to provoke the 3 gods. Looking back now, Acasus didn't fell much anymore, he had completely accepted his actions and choices that he decided at the time. He had no regrets about betraying Ancient Sun God, even after learning that Ancient Sun God would be resurrected. He carved for power and strength, and this was his nature, so he didn't question or feel guilty about his actions, despite now knowing what could happen in the future. Acasus sighed and placed the novel on the table, while drinking more coffee to calm his nerves. To be honest, the survival of the ancient sun god did not surprise him, because he had never thought of himself defeating his previous lord so easily, and he had always known that he would face him again one day. But it was Adam's situation that really surprised him, and his previous self had never even considered this possibility. However, the past no longer matters, Acasus can only plan ahead and achieve his goal. Knowing what might happen in the future is a huge advantage in this world. Despite the fact that there are numerous ways to pry on the future and destiny in the world of mysteries. Nothing compares to the knowledge of future that he now possesses. But, the future also started change to an unknown direction since Acasus was reborn. It will not follow the original timeline at all, and Acasus did not bother to keep it up. Because, from the time being, he has set his plans in motion, his adversaries will not simply sit back and watch, but will take their own actions. Acasus knows that if Adam finds out about his actions, he will not let it happen. Especially if the Grossel travels are what he believes it to be. So, one way or another, the future is bound to change, and he must be prepared to deal with any situation that arises. Nonetheless, Acasus has an advantage in addition to knowing the future. Before, he discovered that the original creator's will within him was weaker than before. When he found this, he was completely perplexed, and he specifically conducted an analysis on himself to determine the situation within him. He eventually concluded that the original creator's will within him was weakening over time, albeit slowly. Acasus was not delighted when he discovered this, as one might expect. After all, he couldn't find the cause of this, even using all of his powers, and he also tried to see if he had any other powers that were causing it. But he couldn't find any, all he had were the authorities of the sun pathway. The reason for his apprehension was because nothing was free in his world, for free things were the most expensive. He has a hunch that his situation is also related to the transmigration. Finally, Acasus sighed and decided to stop thinking about the complicated issues for which he couldn't find answers with his current strength and instead focus on the present. He could only use this explanation to cheer himself up and prepare to deal with problems as they arose. As for why the weakening of the original will gives him a huge advantage, it's mostly because he no longer has to spend a portion of his power suppressing the original will and can use his authority to its fullest. This situation is not without a precedent. During the second epoch, Lilith and Farubati were more powerful than other gods due to their pathway originating from the outer gods, and the outer gods couldn't influence them because the barrier completely prevented it. However, Acasus' chaotic thoughts were interrupted when a blaze of light erupted directly in front of him, revealing a golden star that continued to pulsate. Suddenly, the star's bright light began to dim, and it started to become static, as though it was dying. When Acasus saw this, his face became solemn, because he felt his connection with the angel of wisdom weakening and almost serving. He immediately raised his hand to grab the star. The dying star immediately emitted a blazing light that engulfed him, and he vanished from his kingdom. In Ontal Mountains, Audiobook gazed at the strange scene with his golden irises that glowed with rage evident in it. Chapter 7 Symphony of Apocalypse. As he stared at the strange scene, Audiobook took a moment to calm down his raging emotions. Before him was a vast shimmering light curtain that stretched as far as the steeps of the mountains, seemingly without end. The entire light curtain was expanding at an incredible rate, and the curtain occasionally gave off an ethereal glow, as if it shimmered. However, in the eyes of the Audiobook, this mystical scene was different. All he was looking at was not a light curtain, but information. Everything behind the curtain was nothing more than a tangled mess of disorganized information. Whatever was engulfed by the curtain had lost its sense of reality and had been reduced to basic fundamental blocks of information. Everything that transformed was briny assimilated and woven together to form a strange creature. Whether it was living or non-living before the transformation didn't matter. Audiobook can see the information inside following towards the center and assimilating together, forming a strange white whirlpool in the center. He can see a woman in the middle writhing in agony, her body mutating uncontrollably as if she were on the verge of losing control. Audiobook wasted no time in appearing in front of the expanding curtain and raising his hand to touch the curtain. He came to a halt, because something captivated his attention. Audiobook noticed a weak influence attempting to establish a connection through the information or knowledge known mixed within this chaotic whirlpool that was merging with the women at the time. Audiobook looked up at the night sky, only to see a brown planet shining brightly. It was more like a blazing star than a planet. Soon, a haunting melody echoed right beside his ears as he gazed at the bright brown planet. Before reaching the ears, the melody seemed to reverberate throughout the astral world. Audiobook heard a song so alien that it couldn't have been composed by humans. No, it can't be even called a song or melody, it's more like a terrifying sound from the infinite abyss or void. The sound seemed to transcend all of nature, as if it represented the concept of sound itself. This sound was truly horrifying enough to chill most people to their bones, but it was also mesmerizing and enthralling, completely capturing the listener's attention and tempting them to listen more, despite the horrifying feeling aroused within. Despite being anything but human, it completely evoked the undeniable nature of humanity, curiosity. Audiobook felt the might of the sound at the time, despite the fact that it had no power to affect him. Just hearing the sound left an indelible impression on him. He couldn't even put words together to accurately describe the sound. This led him to discover that the sound had the ability to drive all beings under angel insane simply by hearing it, for the sound was beyond what a human mind could bear. Inextinguishable ravings. Audiobook recalled the name of an outer god who was vying Earth from outside the barrier. And he couldn't believe that the outer god was able to establish a weak connection to Earth through knowledge and information. Even though this connection couldn't possibly be used to send any power, but the outer god was still able to establish a connection through the barrier. Audiobook had never been so serious as he stared at the brown planet in the starry sky, and the haunting sound echoed in his ears. Audiobook's golden iris began to glow, and soon his entire eyes were filled with light. A golden divine halo with light rays appeared right beneath his head. Audiobook's expression became increasingly indifferent as a divine aura erupted from him. He shifted his gaze to the curtain in front of him. Freeze. He spoke in an emotionless tone that reverberated through the space. The shimmering curtain stopped in its path and the never-ending chaotic information became static. In the midst of it all, the screaming woman fell silent. Everything outside the curtain was frozen in an instant. The swaying petals, the flying birds, and the slow-moving night clouds, everything stopped in their path. Audiobook used his authority of order, and the entire reality had been frozen under his command. Audiobook turned to look the woman, his eyes still emotionless. The woman finally stopped screaming, and her process of losing control came to a halt as well, as it too was frozen. Audiobook turned to face the brown planet in the starry sky, which was still shining brightly, after seeing she was fine. He raised his hand, brought his middle and index fingers together, and snapped. Snap. That sound echoed around the world as the bright light of dawn erupted from the world's horizon and the blinding golden sun rose. The sun rose from the horizon at breakneck speed, reaching the center of the sky almost immediately. The blazing golden sun suddenly expanded and became extremely large, as if it desired to occupy the entire sky of the world. The brown planet, which had previously shone brightly, was completely obscured by the golden sun and vanished from the sky. Audiobook could hear the sound coming from the astral world becoming increasingly distorted, as if representing the outer god's rage. Then everything went quiet as the connection to the starry sky was severed. His eyes dimmed and returned to normal, and his indifferent expression faded, giving way to a grave expression. The golden divine halo behind his head vanished, as did the enormous golden sun above him, returning the sky to night's embrace. The night sky, however, had changed, as there were no twinkling stars or crimson moon. Audiobook looked up again, this time to see the only darkness, which was like a veil that draped the entire sky, blocking and serving any interference from the starry sky. Amonines was one who took action immediately after him. Even though everything seemed to take a long time, it had only been a few seconds. I didn't think they would be able to expand their influence on Earth during this time period. Arcas pondered with a sense of helplessness. It appeared that after the fall of the ancient sun god, the barrier weakened significantly. As he walked forward towards the frozen curtain, Arcas recalled the conversation between Klein and Adam in the original book. He eventually stopped thinking about it because he couldn't stop it even if he tried, and instead focused on the frozen curtain and reality that surrounded him. Here, he did not remove the law that had been established prior to using his authority of order, but instead began walking towards the curtain. Arcas raised his hands, and out of nowhere, a book appeared in his hands. Then he walked through the curtain, which was filled with an endless chaotic flux of information. Arcas opened the book with empty white pages, which began flipping automatically with his actions, in the blurry environment with no sense of reality. When he saw this, he snapped his fingers again, and the frozen chaotic information moved, this time towards the book in Arcas' hands rather than the women. The book appeared to become a magnet that attracted all of the chaotic information in the surrounding area. As the information was absorbed into the book, the empty white pages began to fill with distorted letters and paragraphs. Soon, the surroundings returned to normal and the brown book was filled with content and the cover was closed after it. The curtain had vanished, and everything inside it was restored to same as it was before the curtain engulfed it. Now, Arcas stood in the green grass, facing the massive gray tower with stained windows depicting a purple eye that contained countless resplendent stars. This was the residence of the Angel of Wisdom under him, which also had been restored. However, Arcas did not enter right away. He took the book in his hand and began to open it. As he began reading, his expression became solemn and serious. Inextinguishable ravings, the blatherer from the infinite void, the originator of all sounds, the one who plays the symphony of apocalypse that heralds the end of everything. As he stared at these distorted words, Arcas took a breather to calm his complex emotions. Symphony of Apocalypse. Arcas felt sense of powerlessness as he looked at this and thought the future, for even as a god, he wouldn't stand a chance against an outer god, though he might be able to escape if he was lucky. He kept turning the pages and saw more information about inextinguishable ravings, from it staying in Saturn to even performing a ritual pointing to it. Well, this knowledge is far too precise. Arcas analyzed. It's no surprise that the outer god was able to establish a connection through this. But even I and the other gods should be unable to obtain such knowledge unless the source of this. Arcas' eyes widened as he considered something. Artisan and Moses ascetic order. Arcas thought of the new information. The accident. It seemed like I should pay a visit to Artisan. Arcas reflected as his eyes flashed with coldness and indifference. He then resumed to look of the new pages, eventually coming to a halt on a page that displayed something different. Sequence 9 Mystery Prior, Sequence 8 Melee Scholar. Sequence 1 Knowledge Emperor. Potion Formula. Main ingredients, 1 Knowledge Emperor Beander Characteristics. Supplementary ingredients, the Book of Knowledge. Ritual, spread the most abstract and diverse knowledge from the forgotten era and let it be known around the world. Chapter 8 Hermit. Sequence 0 Hermit. Potion Formula, 3 Knowledge Emperor Beander Characteristics and the Hermit's Uniqueness. Ritual, seclude yourself and research into the laws, or truth, of the world. Then, using that knowledge as a fulcrum, create a new law and let it to successfully integrate with the world. Finally, consume the potion for advancement. Well, Arcas' thoughts wandered to the past as he observed the ritual for becoming a hermit. This ritual. Despite having seen the first blasphemy slate and the majority of the ritual of becoming God, Arcas still felt the ritual for hermit was one of the most difficult to complete, because analyzing the laws of the mysteries world is dangerous in and of itself, and creating a new one is even more so. Still, the new law that can be created does not need to be particularly influential, it may simply be a new natural law that has no bearing on the grand scheme of things. However, it must successfully integrated with the world. This is the most difficult step to complete because the law can be incompatible with the world so fail in the process, resulting in the complete collapse of the ceremony. Will she have the potential to become a god? Arcas had a slight expectation of his Angel of Wisdom. He was eager to see if she could become the hermit if given the chance. Arcas stopped thinking more about into it, because he didn't know the status of hermit's uniqueness. However, he knew where the characteristics of the Knowledge Emperor were, and there was one with the Mosaic ascetic order, another with the artisan, and last one was with Lilith, Earth Mother, who obtained it at the end of the third epoch. Arcas finally closed the book after skimming through the rest of it, which was filled with other pathways potion formula and looked at the Grey Tower. The image of a black-haired woman flashed through his mind. She was unwavering in her pursuit of knowledge, no matter what it took in the path. His lips curled into a smile, which quickly faded as he considered her condition. Soon, his face became sullen. He looked up to see the top of the tower as his figure began to fade and vanished. He appeared in a massive yet dimly lit room filled with esoteric books and various drawings of complex structures or technologies far beyond this era. There was also a small model of the solar system in a table, with the names of the planets written on it. There was also a drawing of a starry sky with constellations right nearby. A massive telescope was erected on a platform, and it was extended outside to face the night sky through the rather open ceiling. There were several tables around the platform, each with stacks of paper with notes and calculations written on it. Audiobook took a look around and his attention was immediately drawn to the woman who was lying on the ground with a pool of crimson blood surrounding her. She was completely frozen, even her painful expression and mutation were visible in this state. The woman had black hair and wore a traditional blue robe that was completely soaked in blood, and before she was frozen, she appeared to be trying to clasp her hands together, as if she wanted to pray for help. The woman's body seemed to have been mutating and collapsing, as her entire skin around her hand, cheek, legs, and neck split open and the flesh inside contracted to form eyeballs around her body. Her hair appeared to be growing abnormally long. Seeing her state only fueled Audiobook's rage. He immediately appeared right in front of her frozen body and immediately touched her glabella on her head with his index finger. A golden light erupted from the contact, and the light shone on the black-haired woman's mutating body. The black-haired woman's body immediately began to heal, and the eyeballs on her body melted away, and ruptured skin fused together, and her hair stopped growing and returned to normal. Under this light, the blood in her robes also evaporated. Her face regained vitality as it turned rosy under the light's illumination. In the end, Audiobook looked at his angel of wisdom with some apprehension. Her name is Diana Knight. Diana was a popular woman in the Third Epoch. She was hailed as an innovative inventor and researcher, and she was even compared to artisan by some, who was also very popular at the time. She was born to ordinary parents, but her family was somewhat wealthy, and the money would be sufficient to support her for the rest of her life even if she did not work. As a result, she had a happy childhood. But the good times didn't last long for her because her father became ill and died soon after, and her mother followed shortly in his footsteps, leaving her alone in his world. She had a difficult life after that, but things improved when she discovered her passion when she went to an exhibition put on by an organization under Artisan, which displayed various new inventions. Then, she had spent almost all of her money on pursuing her dreams and aspiring to be extraordinary. Her opportunity came, when someone her parents knew introduced her to the path of hermit. Diana rose to prominence on the Eastern continent as a result of her natural talent in the field of research. But her thirst for knowledge grew day by day, to the point where she set her goal to be to discover the truth of the world and unravel its mysteries when she was only just a demigod. Soon, she suffered for her unrestrained pursuit of knowledge. She delved into mysteries of the Second Epoch and non-human gods, then ventured into ancient ruins. She would have died if she hadn't met Audiobook, who was on an adventure with Ouroboros on their painting quest. Audiobook saved her not because he pitied her, but because his intuition as an king of angels told him that Diana was special, and he also needed high-sequence Beyander of hermit pathway in his legion. Ouroboros looked at Diana and also confirmed his intuition, by saying that her destiny is quite special and unusual. Audiobook took Diana and allowed her to join his legion, but only after warning her about her pursuit of knowledge, saying that without sufficient strength, some knowledge should never be uncovered. He, to be honest, didn't have much hope for her at the time, given her character. However, in the end, she really managed to surprise him. As a result of that incident, she changed and learned from her mistakes. She performed her duties in his legion to the best of her abilities, but she didn't completely lose her thirst for knowledge, though she was more restrained than before. Then, at the start of the Fourth Epoch, she managed to become an angel. Now, Audiobook retracted his hand from her glabella as her brows trembled, then she opened her eyes. He truly cared about all of his subordinates. They were the ones who stayed by his side even when he left all alone after what happened, and they remained loyal to him regardless of his decisions. So, even though he had previously become apathetic, he still kept an eye on his subordinates and occasionally assisted them. As a result, seeing Diana in that state really enraged him. Diana groaned as she sat up and rubbed her temples, and her blurry vision became clearer as she regained control of herself and remembered the previous situation. Am I still alive? This was the first thought that came to her mind. She clearly remembered an unknown entity trying to forcefully impart enormous information and knowledge into her mind when she was about to make a new discovery. She couldn't even stand up to that entity and she had the absurd notion that the unknown entity was the embodiment of knowledge itself. The knowledge was so vast and foreign that even she, a sage, couldn't comprehend it, thus causing her to nearly lose control. She thought she was going to die, and she couldn't even summon any strength to pray to her Lord. She was completely helpless. Diana, what did I say to you before? A deep voice interrupted her thoughts, causing her to jolt up from the ground and turn to face the source of the sound. Diana noticed her lord who stood before her. Well, she knew who saved her now, but this only made her feel more useless and incompetent, as she was always the one in the group who made the blunder and caused trouble, and getting saved. She really wanted to be better. She also knew her lord was angry despite his emotionless face because she could tell by looking at his glowing eyes, and the surrounding temperature rose with his words. Don't get lost on the path of knowledge. Akasis warned her as he approached her. Even though what happened now was not her fault, he remained her due to his worry. And, by combining future events and news, he can somewhat guess what happened here. The issue is most likely due to Hermit's uniqueness. Akasis speculated. I hope it hasn't come to life yet. Yes, the entire situation is most likely related to the birth of the hidden sage, and he is now certain that the artisan played a significant role in it. He would gladly stop the birth of hidden sage if he could. However, the situation is still unclear, and he needs to meet with artisan to clarify a lot of things. Akasis did not want the hidden sage to be born, rather, he preferred that an actual Beander to ascend and become the hermit. Chapter 9 Hidden Sage. My lord, there had been minor Misha ap here. Diana stuttered as she tried to stand straight and regained control of herself. Finally, she managed to force a smile, which looked even worse than her crying face. I apologize for disturbing you again. Diana was a proud and fearless woman, so even though she was an angel serving under her lord, she preferred to be independent and not always reliant on Akasis, like Lucas. She wished to grow in strength and progress further in her own path. So, she really hated herself when she caught with up situations like this again and again, and believe her, she makes blunder quite frequently. So much so, she wondered if she had been targeted by that eccentric snake of Mercury, who has a very dark heart despite having the appearance of an innocent boy. Akasis sighed after looking at her state with complex eyes. He waved his hand, and a table with 2 chairs appeared in front of them. Diana and her lord were now sitting in the chair, despite the fact that they had previously been standing. She began rubbing her temples, as she felt the sequelae. Despite the fact that her lord mostly healed her, she still had some lingering effects from what happened. It was truly horrifying to have knowledge and information forced on you. To put it another way, Diana felt as if someone had squeezed all the knowledge and forcefully twisted it into her mind. It was as though a sharp object had been pierced right into her temple and inserting it right into her brain, followed by a twist. Now, an aroma assaulted Diana's nose, jolting her out of her trance. Drink this. Akasis passed a cup of hot tea that smelled grassy and light. It might help you regain control of yourself. Diana didn't think much as she took the cup in her hands and took a sip almost immediately. Her dizziness in her head immediately subsided, and her spirit was revitalized. Her mind and vision became instantly clear, and the sequelae she was experiencing were washed away. Diana stared at the tea, as if she couldn't believe what had just happened. What is the recipe, my lord? Diana said that out loud, without giving a second thought. Akasis responded with a new question. Do you think it's good? He brewed the tea himself, so his divinity also slightly affected the tea, that is also why it's so effective for her. Yes, it's the best tea I've ever had. Diana responded quickly, and she didn't hold back on her complaints, assuming that the tea was most likely made by her lord. Well, you can pray to me after that, and I'll give you the recipe. Akasis said with a smile. Now, let's get to the point, shall we? His smirk faded as he said this, giving way to a solemn expression. Diana was also aware of the gravity of the situation, so she refrained from making light of it as she had previously. Yes, my lord. Diana nodded, just a moment. She spoke solemnly after raising her hand to her head and touching her temple with her index finger. Then, a dim white light appeared from the contact, and Diana moved her hand away from her temple as if she sensed it. The light brightened as a wisp of light extended from her temple, one end of which was clasped onto the index finger. The wisp of light eventually separated from her temple. Diana shook her hand in the left side of the table after a brief glance at the wisp. The wisp of light detached from her finger and became illusory before blending into the surrounding reality. It caused the entire reality surrounding the table to become hazy and blurry, and then everything went dark. Akasis and Diana remained seated at the table, holding a teacup, despite the fact that everything around them was nothing but darkness. The darkness was immediately illuminated by a dim light, revealing a scene in which Diana was skimming through various notes and sketching. This is my memory. Diana stated as she stood up from her chair and began walking towards herself. As a sage, it is very simple to extract memory from their minds. Akasis got up and followed her. He looked around, the details of the memory almost perfectly matching reality, as it was reconstructed according to Diana's subconscious, and the memory is also in a different perspective. This has a lot of similarities to pensive experience in Harry Potter. Akasis' thoughts returned to the past as he walked with the Diana. I was just trying to uncover some old secrets, my lord. Diana's words brought him back to reality, and she continued with a distressed expression, pointing to herself in the memory. That's when it started. Akasis looked around at the scene before it abruptly changed, as a blurry eye appeared right behind Diana. The blurry eye didn't appear to be fully formed. The eye also didn't hold any emotions, and Akasis couldn't feel any life in it either. In the memory, an almost imperceptible light shot out of the eye and struck Diana, who appeared to be completely unaware of the danger lurking behind her. Then, the eye disappeared. Diana fell to the ground and began to lose control because she couldn't comprehend the information provided by the eye. Soon, the situation proceeded to what happened before, as the everything surrounding her lost a sense of reality and started breaking into information. Diana's expression worsened as she witnessed the process. She really wanted to find out what that eye was, but she eventually stopped herself because she was afraid that something even worse would happen if she did. Enough of that, Diana. The sound of Akas's voice echoed in her ears, instantly calming her nerves. Diana paused for a moment, then waved her hands around. Her actions caused the surrounding space to crack as if it were a mirror, eventually collapsing on itself. Eventually, they returned to reality, sitting in the same chairs, facing each other. What is that eye, my lord? Diana questioned him right away. That was the hermit uniqueness. Akas's responded calmly, as if the incident didn't bother him in the least. Uniqueness. Diana's eyes widened, as she was taken aback by the fact that what had instilled her knowledge was the uniqueness itself. However, this confirmed her previous feeling, as hermit uniqueness does indeed embody the knowledge. However, uniqueness should not be able. Diana's expression has become somewhat perplexed. Her understanding of uniqueness was limited, but she still knew that uniqueness should not behave in that manner unless someone is behind it or there is a problem with the uniqueness. There is, in fact, a problem with uniqueness. Akas's confirmed it, as if he could see right through her mind. Akas's confirmed a lot of things, and the eye is linked to hermit uniqueness. However, it has not yet evolved into what it will be like in the future. The uniqueness seemed to be in a strange state, it couldn't be considered living, but it also has some weak consciousness in it. After seeing that eye, he knows that hidden sage will be born soon. But, the situation should be still somewhat salvageable. Diana, on the other hand, was experiencing a great deal of emotional turmoil when she heard her lord's confirmation. After all, she was an angel of the hermit pathway, this situation was bound to affect her again, and she couldn't always rely on her lord to save her. You don't need to be concerned. After seeing her worried expression, Akasa said. Diana pressed her worried heart after hearing his reassurance, and in her mind, she was also planning a way to deal with the situation. Would you like to accompany me? Akasa asked abruptly, as he stood up from his seat. Of course, Diana says, while she pushed her worries and thoughts to the back of her mind. And, her face became a little excited. Her lord will not simply ask her to accompany him without a reason. When she accompanied him before, she had a bountiful harvest. Take my hand. Akasa extended his hand to her, she immediately complied. My lord, where are we going? Diana finally asked after she had calmed down. We are going to meet the famed artisan and then pay a visit to the Mosaic ascetic order. As he spoke, Akasa smiled. He then turned around and looked Diana in the eyes. After all, they must pay for what occurred here. He stated rather calmly. Akasa then chuckled as he looked at Diana, who was too shocked and terrified to speak. Their figures became illusory and vanished from the tower, and with their departure, the frozen reality under his order was restored. Chapter 10 Artisan. As the golden sun rose in between the range of mountains, the light of dawn glazed out the horizon. Under this light, the night sky faded, giving way to day. The light shone on two figures standing on the mountain's crest. One of the figures was a woman with Caucasian skin and a sharp nose. Her hair was long and black, almost reaching her hips, and her eyes were sapphire blue. The black-haired lady wore traditional blue robes embroidered with stars. The woman was now standing on the crest of a snowy mountain, her eyes wide, as if she was astonished by what she was seeing. Next to her was a man with short white hair that was slightly messy and a golden iris that glowed and surged like the blazing sun in the sky. He had a chiseled jaw and thin lips. He was dressed in a black suit and held a brown book in his hand. The man was also looking at the scene before him, but he was calmer than the woman standing next to him. They were, of course, Akasa and Diana. Diana couldn't believe what she was seeing, it truly shook her to her core because what she was seeing was too incredible and magnificent. There was a floating continent in front of her. Yes, a continent that was floating directly before her, visible through the clouds. What was more astonishing was its size, which was nearly a quarter of the northern continent. She had never seen anything like it before, and even she, who had witnessed godly miracles, was truly taken aback by the floating continent. As for how such a massive continent could exist without affecting the rest of the world, she only felt that the space here was slightly different, so she inferred that some changes had been made to space in the surroundings. Come on, you are this surprised by just seeing this. Akasa chuckled, as he turned and looked at her shocked face. We haven't even gotten to the center of the floating continent. Is this the home of artisan, my lord? Diana finally got back to her senses, and asked after slight excitement. She was taken aback when her lord said that they would go to Mosaic ascetic order to avenge what had happened to her. She hadn't expected her lord to be so concerned about her. It just made her feel strange. Don't get her wrong, she didn't have any feelings for her lord, she isn't become that stupid yet. And now she's standing in front of a floating continent, where she'll most likely meet the artisan himself. She felt a rush of excitement and utter confusion in her heart, as artisan was her childhood idol. She even discovered her passion at his exhibition, but she never had the opportunity to meet him. Concerning the confusion, she didn't understand why her lord had brought her here rather than to the Mosaic ascetic order, where the uniqueness was most likely to be present. It certainly is. Artisan nodded and motioned for her to take his hands. Come on, we don't have much time. Diana grabbed his hand and felt the world before her spin for a moment before returning to normal. She turned and looked around, realizing she was in a large room, but her attention was drawn to the scene outside the window before she could see any further. Outside the window, there were numerous skyscrapers with strange architecture, as well as many people flying around the city in unusual vehicles that were gliding through the sky. She also looked around, and managed to find various people conducting research on strange inventions. Diana stared, mouth agape, at everything. I wasn't expecting a guest. A deep voice drew her attention back, as she turned and looked at the source of the voice. A man stood in front of them, holding a bronze scroll in his hand. He had brown hair and black eyes. He rather had a high nose and was dressed in a gray robe. The man fixed his gaze on Diana for a brief moment, causing her body to stiffen. The excitement she had felt when she finally saw her idol before was swept away as she met those indifferent eyes. For, she had the impression that she had been completely exposed, with all of her secrets laid bare for him to see. Her body relaxed and the sensation vanished as soon as a hand was placed on her shoulder. When she turned around, her lord was standing beside her, his hand on her shoulders. Yet, a friend at that. The man smiled amicably, as he turned to face Artisan, who was standing next to Diana. Artisan looked at the artisan, who was behaving friendly, as if he had no idea why he'd come here. He had previously met Artisan and had a number of run-ins with each other. During the third epoch, Artisan was very famous because his talent triumphed most. One can see it clearly, by just looking at the floating continent and the city that was so out of era, that he managed to build. Artisan even managed to gain the guidance of the ancient sun god himself, which pushed him one step closer to becoming a god. Since he learned a great deal from ancient sun god. This was also the time when they became acquainted. Shall we cut the nonsense? The cold tone of Artisan caused the temperature in the room to rise. Artisan had enough of this, for didn't have the patience or time to play along with Artisan. His words made Artisan's smile stiffen, and Diana was attempting to make blend in with this surroundings, as she sensed the atmosphere between them was way off. Artisan began walking towards Artisan as a divine aura erupted from him, filling the room with golden flames. The room in which Artisan was present was anything but ordinary, as it contained valuable notes and calculations that the artisan had painstakingly written. It had inventions with enough power to put most future sealed artifacts to shame. There was also endless books on the various shelves that held knowledge that delved into esoteric concepts such as cosmos, time, and space. While, the room was also filled with restrictions and powerful defense, to the point where even an archangel would be powerless if caught in it. Even so, everything went up in golden flames, the flames kept burning it all and illuminating the center of the room which was unaffected by the flames. What gives you such confidence? Artisan smiled as he spoke, and his piercing eyes locked on Artisan. Despite everything that has happened, you are here with such calmness even when facing me. Let me guess. Artisan's smile widened, and he continued without giving Artisan a chance to reply or react. Is it because of Adam?